Hello, I'm Brent Farris from the Bearded Man Studios, and I'm here with...
Brett Falls from the Bearded Man Studios, and we're awesome, and this is going to be great.
Yes, he's another software engineer with us. So we're here, and we're going to be talking in this Thinking Like an Inventor, I swear I can talk. We're going to be talking about version control. So I have a description here of repository, which is just a... it's just a definition of what repository is. And basically...
It's a giant bookcase!
Kind of. It's basically whenever you create versions of your application. So let's say you're writing some software, you make a commit, and then you make another commit, and you want to be able to roll back to previous versions because you screw things up like we normally do. It's an easy way of rolling back those changes. So it's like keeping versions of everything you've done, so you can iterate through them. Or
Think of it as a stack of disks on top of each other, where each disk is storing its data separately, and it has exactly what's written on the label on the top, and you know exactly what's being committed to it and what is being stored, and you could, put the disk at the top of the rack, or you can put it at the bottom. You can just move them around, but in reality, it's just a way of making sure it's a security for keeping everything safe.
Exactly. And keeping those iterations is usually what a company wants, because if you are leaving and you're quitting and all of a sudden you screw up everything, they want to be able to go back to other things, because I know we've all thought about that, and I could just screw up everything right now. But with version control, you can't really do that because they have all the previous versions. So both Brett and I have been in the software for about 5 years. I'm holding up 10 fingers. For 5 years. And my first job, I actually didn't have version control. I was the only software engineer there. I didn't use version control, and I did iterative updates on a website, and I could never roll back. So that means I could never make a mistake, and that was my own fault for not using version control.
I, on the other hand, was the cool kid with the 1 terabyte hard drive. And I saved 2 of that every time, and then when I broke it, I was like, oh, damn.
So, being in software for so long has, I know it's only 5 years, but, I've programmed every night and every day, so it's been like 50 years. But programming for the majority of the last 5 years, I've learned that version control is super important. It is to the point where if you don't have it, you better get it.
It's like car insurance for your computer, but not just your computer. Your project.
Yes.
Which has your driver's license, your keys, and your social security. In which case you want to version it.
Yes. Imagine if you could keep versions of your girlfriend or boyfriend, and you didn't like their current version right now, you could just roll back to an old one. It's like that, except in real life with software. So, we're going to be talking about a bunch of version control systems that we've used. I have used Perforce. I used it at my first job, and it was kind of weird. It was all graphical user interface, and it felt more artsy at the time that I used it. This was about 3 years ago. First version control, 3 years ago. So when I used it, it seemed kind of artsy. It had a lot of arts tools. It can compare images and show you befores and afters, which other things do now. But at the time, it was the only one that did that. It was made for a large enterprise, and we were a small studio, so it was kind of weird. I don't know if you had anything with Perforce.
I've used it momentarily. It was a very horrible experience, I will say. I've always used Subversion, Git Hub, and using those mediums to get to my data and storing it. Like when I got introduced to Perforce, I was like, oh, wow, this has, previous and now, and this doesn't work the right way.
And this sucks. So I actually installed a Perforce server on a server I had at home, and when I did that, it was very difficult to get a lot of people on, and I think it's like built for Linux, and I had this Windows machine, and I converted to Linux, and then I had a hard time with Linux. I'm pretty sure it's a lot easier now. I don't want to bang on Perforce, but when I used it, I didn't like it. That's all I can say.
I think for big companies, I know they've been using it for a long time, but As far as personally, I have not had a good experience with it. I'm hoping that will change in the future, but for now, my opinion is to stick to the other alternatives that we are coming up to now.
Yeah. And another thing is my channel, as you know, whenever I program, it's all revolving around games. Brett is in the game industry as well. So Perforce for games, probably not. Perforce for software, if you want to use enterprise software, stuff like that, probably. Especially when they have an IT team that can manage it and delegate it and all that kind of stuff. But for games, we use two things, two version control systems in majority. The first one being Subversion. This is a legacy one. We've used it for quite a bit of time. I think a lot of people have used it. It's been really easy to set up. You set it up on Windows or Linux or whatever, and get it up and running really quick and have people connecting and committing pretty quickly. So, have you used Subversion? I used it on a small project before.
I use it on very small projects. It would be like I'd be using Tortoise SVN to commit to it, and it was very simple, easy to use. I think the only problems I really had to it was if there was like really bad internet, it wouldn't like commit right. It would kind of break it, like when it would commit something, and I'd have to like delete everything on the cache and then recommit everything again. It was a little tedious here and there. I'm sure they have improved it since then, but for what I've experienced, it was definitely a lot easier to use than Perforce as I've used it, and that was Perforce recently. So I can say that from what I experienced then, it was actually not too bad.
Yeah, we actually use it at the studio that I work at, which is a fairly large studio. We use Subversion, and inside we also use various other little version controls for smaller projects, but our main projects are in Subversion, and that was kind of dictated from an old CTO, which unfortunately he was a really cool guy, but he doesn't work there anymore. He kind of enforced this Subversion, and it was also enforced by I think it was actually more enforced by the IT guy because he didn't want to deal with a whole bunch of other people. So as Brett mentioned, one of the downsides to Subversion is you need to have internet connection, which doesn't seem bad in an enterprise or especially if you're working all on a local box, so you're inside of a studio and you have a server there that you're working on. Not such a big problem because it's all intranet where everybody's connected already. However, if you go home and you can't connect to it, you can't have any versioning. So everything you work on is in one massive version at home if you don't have internet. Which means that if you make a mistake, you can't roll back to things that you've done before, and you could be working for 8 hours on one thing, and that's just no bueno.
Yeah.
So at our studio, we're also talking about right now, since the IT guy that was leading the charge for Subversion has left, we're all starting to creep in with this new technology that's fairly new to the game. It's Git. Git is basically another version control. It was created by the same guy who created Linux, if you know that guy. So that's also what rose its popularity, is because that guy's pretty famous. So Git is a different kind of repository. It works the same way. You have a repository in the cloud. You submit your files up. You submit your versions to it. However, you can have a local version of it. So if your internet cuts out, you can continue to make iterative commits, and they just stack up on your local computer. And you can go through and check the versions and do differences between the versions and be able to roll back. And then once you have internet, you can push your entire commit list.
The only thing I will say about that is they need to have their own soundtrack. It should really be just going for it. It is so good.
Are you going to sing at your wedding?
Maybe.
Okay, good. Okay, so Git.
Git is a godsend to all versioning controls. It is very well used in the industry. I use it. It's amazing. It keeps everything, up to date. You get to have everything stored locally and then push it up to whenever you're ready. You could also pull down. You have separate branching that you can do that could all be stored locally. And the only thing that I can say that could be, the Achilles heel to Git is that it could take up a massive amount of storage space because everything is just being pushed into, if you have so many different branches, you're going to have so many different files, folders, everything just there. So with that in mind, it can, be costly. But, if you manage your projects, well, and you have everything laid out correctly, I wouldn't think it's ever going to be a huge deal.
Yeah, and so here at the Bearded Man Studios, we've been around since 2012. We actually started using Git in early 2013, late 2012-ish, and we've been using Git the entire time without any hiccups. And we've been working on projects for websites like PHP, HTML, CSS, all your default web languages. And we've also worked massively inside of Unity. And Git, from the get-go, didn't really have Unity in mind, but it worked fantastically. I mean, we just switched on visible meta files, started committing. We only had obvious issues of two people working on the same binary files at the same time, but you can't really get around that no matter what version control you use.
Yes, I would definitely have to say, if you're going to get started, this is your go-to for versioning control. It is one you definitely want to get familiar with. It is industry standard. It is the bread and butter of what is out there. So I would look at it, definitely get familiar with it. You'll be using it a lot. Obviously, there's other ones out there that, like we've discussed, Perforce and Subversion, and we have those available, but this is the one that you just, you gotta get familiar with it because of how advanced it can get, as well as how easy it is to get things done properly in it.
Right. And speaking of getting started, there is Git Hub, which is basically just Git, but they host a server for you, so you don't have to create a server, set up a server, and have a server running all the time. You can actually create a free account on GitHub, and you can start committing to public branches. So you can create your own repository, a public one on GitHub, and you can start playing with it and learning how to use Git without having to pay a dime. And then, of course, once you get used to it and you want to start using projects, you can either create a server of your own and host your Git projects there, or you can pay GitHub
$5.
A pretty small amount. It's like $5 to $7
very indie friendly
for 5 private repositories.
It is great how indie friendly they are. They are extremely helpful with the pricing. It is amazing that they charge only $5 and you get 5 private repositories that you can do your projects on.
Right.
And not only that, you have your private repositories, but you can easily save that elsewhere, close off the repository, and start a new one in case you need to move on to a different branch, assuming that you don't have multiple teammates working on that project at that time.
Yeah. Another thing that they have is you can add your friends or whoever's working with you to GitHub, and they can be collaborators and work on it with you. So GitHub is a pretty cool cat. Mm-hmm. Might I say cactopus.
You could also blame people. You can blame them for committing the wrong things.
Subversion does that, but I like Git's blame.
It makes it very colorful. And they also have like a in browser, and when you go to the website, they have like a activity for your commits, and
right,
it's pretty cool.
You can create a wiki on there, and you have markup, and you can have like bug reports on there, so people can put bugs on your repo, and you can check them off.
You can do sample code. Gist.
Yeah, they have Gist where you can throw up just code, and it can be private or public. It's just a ton of stuff. I would say check it out if you're new to any kind of version control, because it will get you kickstarted pretty easily, and it's pretty straightforward. So that's kind of what we wanted to talk about with version control software. So there's some things about.
Before we move on, there's one I have to mention, that GitHub is not, I feel, Mac friendly. At least the program itself, but obviously the servers is extremely helpful. So I would recommend, if you're on a Mac, to use SourceTree to access your servers and branches and other data.
And SourceTree is just software, right?
SourceTree is just software. Right. It is just to access your data.
It is free. Pay for it?
You don't have to pay. It's absolutely free. Even the registration even points out, and it says, "Hey, this is free. Just give me your email." And you're like, "Oh, okay."
Right. Here's my firstborn child too. You can have that.
Yeah, here's my email. Oh, here's the license key. Wait, why is this even there?
So SourceTree, if you're on a Mac, I do a lot of web stuff, and I do it mostly on Linux. I used to do it on Mac, so I don't know as much Mac software. Brett probably knows more about Mac software than I do. So, with that, we're going to talk about branching. It's a part of version control. It doesn't really matter whether you're on Subversion or Git. You want to make branches, and branches is exactly what it sounds like. It's like a tree. Whenever you have your base trunk, is what they call it. You have your trunk, which is your core, and then you create branches, which are basically copies of either the entirety of your entire application, the core, or you can make copies of just small segments, and you can have branches that could be pointing to two different repositories, and they combine into this one branch that you're working on. For example, if you have a part of your application where you are working on a specific element of the application or a feature, you can make a branch so that you can work on that feature and break everything you want, and then everyone else who's working on other stuff doesn't have to get all of your breaking code, and they can work on their own thing without being interfered by you and what you do.
Just don't burn down the tree. Do not commit your broken code.
Yes. And there's a lot of things. Some people say don't commit to trunk. I work at a really big studio, and we commit to trunk all the time. So it really is dependent on where you're working. So, but we do make a ton of branches, especially if we're working on huge features. We make a branch for it when we just stick the team that's working on it on that branch. Otherwise, we kind of commit to trunk. It's a big studio, so that means we go on to QA and we randomly test stuff on there for no reason. So weird stuff happens like that. But you usually want to branch whenever you're working on a feature, and you want to make a copy of your entire repository or segments of your repository and work on it separately so you don't mess with other people.
I guess in my experience, it's been a bit different than yours. You don't. So I guess from my expertise, I would recommend my way of going about it if you can. Otherwise, you're able to do whatever you have. But this is what I would recommend completely, is that you have your branches. You always keep dev, which is your development environment. You try to keep it as clean as possible and only code that is, acceptable, that doesn't break the build and makes it stable and, doesn't lose the instability in what it is. You make sure that dev is good. And from dev to QA, you have that, process where it gets molded into QA, and QA is always just going to be not really outdated, but it will be a branch of dev, and QA just only gets pulled from dev whenever it's ready to get QA'd. And from there, you move on to production and, post-production. You have all these different branches that you work on, but you generally want to make sure that, as Brent has said, that you keep your feature branch separate. You finish your feature, you make sure that everyone approves of it, then you push it to dev and make sure that you actually first, before you even do that, you pull from dev to make sure you have all the latest code in it, test everything out again, and then you commit to dev. And when you have committed to dev and it is in there, then that's when you move on to your next feature or bugs, and you just make sure that you keep dev clean, because you want a clean sink. You don't want it dirty. You don't want to leave the plates there. You don't want to make a giant mess. You just don't want things that is untidied in it, so that when it gets merged into QA is always clean.
Yeah, and there's some ways that we go about it differently. At our studio, we have a lot of local copies, and we commit them to trunk, which is basically Brett's version of dev. But we also do have a QA, a stage, a production. We have this whole line of stuff that narrows down the commits, and we also have a guy who does releases, and he kind of manages all this stuff because we have the availability for resources. So if you're a big studio, you can probably do the same method we do, because we have so many layers of protection getting off into production. There's a couple different paradigms, but basically it's the way that Brett laid it out. We kind of have our own closed environments, and we push and keep things as clean as possible. We don't want to break anyone on dev, and that includes front end and back end. I work specifically on back end, though I come from a front end background, but Brett works in front end, so it's good. It's a good combination here.
Yes.
Get the feng shui of combat.
I will say, just to clarify, if it isn't, I'm not sure if we spoke about it enough, is that branching is just a way for you to all collaborate on one particular project. So the idea is that you are building a tree and that you're putting these twigs together, you're putting the leaves on, and you're putting on the apples. You're just trying to assemble this tree so that it looks good. So the idea is to just work as a collaborative team to commit to a particular branch and then make sure that when you commit your branch to dev or to whatever environment that you're committing to, that it is, clean. So the whole idea of branching is just an idea of making sure the features of the game are done on time, whether that be bugs, features, testing. You have all these being done and getting moved up the branch so that your tree only grows bigger.
Right. So we'll have Brett on for a lot of other I guess videos, podcasts, whatever you want to call these, and we'll talk about more in-depth stuff about industry standard, a lot about programming, because we're programmers, developers, and just mostly all focused on games. So I guess thanks for watching. It's turned out to be a longer video than I expected, but that's all right. It was fun.
But it is good. It is very good to learn this. It is helpful.
Yes. So until next time, I'll talk to you later. I'm Brent Farris.
I'm Brett Folds.
And see you later.